he was certainly the right commissioner at the right time for this league in the 80s when, they had to get their foothold domestically first with national television, with making their players, stars in the American sporting landscape. And he was very fortunate that Magic Johnson was in LA with the Showtime Lakers, Larry Bird in Boston. And, that certainly, ramped up their ability to do television deals, to make the NBA Finals an event. And I think what Stern did a really good job of was, getting that foothold in the States with Magic and Bird in the 80s. And then in 92 with the Dream Team, and with Michael Jordan at his height and Magic and Bird at the end, that Olympic team really started, to plant the seed globally for sort of the next chapter of the league and the growth of the game and popularity around the world, but also the development of star talent in all corners of the world. And those are certainly two of his great legacies.
Woj, was he a better commissioner when he was salty?
I don't know about that. I think his, the hammer that he wielded and the threat that hung over people if they didn't bend to his ways, I think created a lot of the conspiracy theories that existed in the league. The belief among teams, whether it was owners or general managers or coaches or players, that if they didn't go along with what he wanted and how he wanted to do it, there would be repercussions. And whether those repercussions were real or not, whether, they were grounded in, officiating and, any other number of ways the game could be impacted, I think it had a negative effect on the league. And I think the NBA became, maybe more than any other pro sport, the idea that there were, Big Brother was at work and that the league office was pulling strings on things, whether or not it was always true or ever true, or maybe sometimes true. I think his style fed into that paranoia among those who worked and ran the league.
Talking to Adrian Wojnarowski with us, our ESPN NBA insider. Woj, with all of that as the backdrop, how would you describe then his relationship with the players, not only the ones now that look back sort of retrospectively on David Stern, but the ones that were going through at those times where there were multiple lockouts, all the things that you just hinted at? How would you best describe his relationship with the group of people who, he served?
Mike, I think it deteriorated through the years. I think he became known, more later in his career, around the time of the dress code, the lockouts. There was this sense that he wasn't, listen, this is somebody who was a great advocate for, as a lawyer prior to joining the NBA, advocate in the African-American community in Northern Jersey, took on a pro bono case about housing discrimination that was pretty groundbreaking at that time. And that was his legacy. I think as he got older, I think as he became, as the world was changing around him a little bit, as the owners in the league, the players in the league who had greater voices as to what they wanted and were at odds with him, I think that relationship with the players, with the next generation of players, while there was always, I think, great respect, they knew what he had done for the league. I don't think it was the same as what he had in the 80s and even in the 90s with Jordan and, that era, Barkley. While he had, his run-ins with Barkley, he'd have to bring him in the league office, had to suspend him a time or two. I do think there was a mutual respect. I think there was more of a distance later on with him, with players and maybe that was to be expected as he got up to 25, 30 years as commissioner of the league.
Well, it does bring up an interesting comparison, right? As Woj is with us this morning talking about the life, the legacy of David Stern and his 30-year run in the NBA, because one of the moves that he made toward the back end of his time as the commissioner was to not allow Chris Paul to go to the Lakers and basically saying we're not going to do that. And now we're in this situation, Woj, where every great player does nothing but try and recruit other great players around them, whether it was what happened with the 3 in Miami or the 3 in Boston or what we saw with Golden State, and now what's happening with both the Clippers and the Lakers trying to get all the talent. It makes you wonder how he would have handled these type of situations.
Yeah, the league changed, there's no question. And, part of, you go back to the Chris Paul situation, it was because, he had become, the de facto owner and the steward of that New Orleans organization and had in his mind to make decisions based on what was best for selling that team, for keeping its value up. And it was a position that probably no owner should have been in, and it certainly impacted the balance of power and maybe that next decade in the league. And a lot of the player movement that we've seen over the last decade, that started with LeBron going to Miami and Chris Bosh forming that big 3. I think that came from USA Basketball because, they had rebuilt that program. They had to bring back, the United States on the global stage. It had really fallen, and putting those players together in that situation had built those relationships, had started to allow those players to think about what it would be like if they weren't just playing together for Team USA, but were playing together in the NBA. And I think that was a natural byproduct of it. I think for his times, David Stern was the right commissioner for the NBA. But in these times now, I think Adam Silver, was the logical next progression of what Stern had built.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For highlights and analysis, check out the ESPN app. And for live streaming and premium content, check out ESPN+.